You can't price your product until you truly know what it costs to make it. Profitability is super important these days, and I've been talking a lot about pricing in season 8 of the Scaling Emerging Beauty podcast. Pricing is one of the most important and often most overlooked decisions you'll make as you grow your brand. And today's focus for the conversation is on COGs and margin. Whether you're a brand new founder or you are a seasoned CPG expert who is bringing a new product to the market, this episode and series is for you. As of the published date of this episode, I am an associate of Ulta Beauty. The ideas and thoughts represented here are my own and not that of my employer. Welcome to the Scaling Emerging Beauty podcast, a show that provides actionable insights for early stage emerging beauty brands looking to scale at retail. I'm Monique Benoit, your host. I'm also a former retail buyer who has spent years working with beauty brands and retailers to help them sell products that hit the shelves in major stores. Now, in episode 804, 2 episodes ago, we talked about pricing relative to your retailer. And today we're going to zoom in even closer to look at your product costs as we dive into part 3 of our special pricing series. In this series, I'm breaking down pricing step by step so that you can set prices that are going to be sustainable, they cover your costs, and they position your brand to succeed at retail and beyond. Let's go ahead and talk COGs and margins. Woohoo! Let's get into it. Let's go ahead and just start with what is COGs? What the heck is COGs? COGs is an acronym that stands for Cost of Goods Sold. And when brands think of COGs, they should consider everything that goes into the making of your product. Honestly, I would even say sometimes you should consider marketing and launch campaigns, but that can technically be separate from your actual COGS breakdown. COGS include your product formula. That's the goop that goes into the package or the vessel, whatever you're selling your stuff in. Packaging. This includes any custom tooling that you might have or finishes that you might desire to make your product look amazing. This also includes production, making your product, putting it on the line, and freight. We cannot forget freight, especially after COVID. COVID taught us a lot about freight, y'all. So let's not forget about that. That should absolutely be included in your cost. Anytime I was consulting with brands and we were talking about COGs, I only referred to the landed cost. It's important to consider this because there are so many additional hidden costs if you don't look at that landed cost. Now, in episode 804, 2 episodes back, I talked about retailer margin ranges in part 2 of this pricing series. So check that out if you missed it, because the next thing that I'm going to say, which is that it is critical to build margins that will fit with your target retailer's margins. Now, in part 1 of the series, I talked about doing your research so that you understand the retail margins that are out there for the category that you sell in and your competitive set. In part 2 of the series, I talked a little bit about the expectation of margins for the retailer. And what I'm saying now is that they all kind of go in together and feed into your COGs. You need to do the research so that you're pricing it correctly, and then you need to know what your target retailer wants to sell it at. Otherwise, you might not even have a shot at selling it in there. The math needs to math for you to be profitable. And these days, more than ever, profitability matters. So once you know your landed costs, you can consider your retailer's target margins and factor in other things like trade marketing spend at the retailer. Let me pause for a second because I know I'm talking a lot about considering your retailer's margin. And in this season, I'm going to talk about the importance of DTC, and I know that that is very relevant today. But the reason why I talk about knowing your retailer's target margins and all of this stuff now is because if that is your end goal, you got to start with the end in mind. The worst thing that you can do, well, not the worst thing, but what I hate to see happen is you have an amazing DTC site. You sell your product at a retail, let's say $12, and you're making solid margin DTC, but then you get a knock on the door from your favorite retailer, the retailer that's on your vision board for your brand. And they call you and they say, hey, we want to bring you in. That retailer happens to want margins at 40%. But you're already keeping things very tight with the retail prices that you set. Well, now you're going to have to increase your retails in order to enter the retailer. Now, that's not the end of the world, but that is going to potentially become a barrier for the consumers that you've already built a relationship with, that have come to love and grow your brand. And now you can sell stuff at $12, but that doesn't mean you can sell it at $15. I'm going to talk a little bit about consumer psychology in part 4 of this series, so I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but just know pricing matters. This is why I'm encouraging you to do your research now so that you know that you are ready and you won't have to necessarily make those changes. Okay, sorry for the slight tangent. Let me get back to some of the other fees that you need to consider when you're looking at selling at retail. Okay, we talked about marketing, trade spend, promotions. Again, brands fund promotions. So that means that if your regular retail for an item is $10 and the retailer is promoting it on sale for $8, you as a brand are typically going to fund that $2 discount. That's just the way that retail works. So again, build it into your margin. Other things to consider: shelf fees, slotting fees, depending on the retailer that you work with. That might be another cost that you need to consider. I talked about promotional funding. Some retailers might have additional fees that they want you to pay for. Maybe it's signage in the stores. Maybe it's for displays if you're going to have special placement in the stores. All of these things cost money. And this is why, again, add it into your margin. Just in general, rough math, add in another 15% and say that 15% is going to cover all of my future retailer costs. And so I'm going to build that in when I think and select my target retail. Build it into your margin. Did you hear me? Okay, you heard me. Build it into your margin. Now, one thing I do want to note, you're going to get an increase in profitability as you scale. Right? So I know that some of you are thinking, Monique, my margins are slim. And you want me to do what? You want me to build this margin in and increase the prices? I'm trying to be accessible. I know, and I hear you. I have not built a brand as a founder myself, so I can only share what I've learned from talking to friends. And what I will say is this: you do have some economies of scale that will allow you to sell more later that are going to impact your costs. What I can also say is that profitability is becoming increasingly important. And so you just want to make sure that all of the things map out, your formulations, your category, your retailer, so that you can make sure you're going to be able to scale profitably and that your costs are optimized. One general rule of thumb that I've heard is that you can consider having a landed cost that is about 10 to 20% of your target retail. So that means if you have a cost that's $1, your target retail could be $10. And you would still be providing a cost to the retailer at the margins that I talked about in part 2 of this series. But that again builds in margins so that you as the brand owner and brand founder are still making money. So let's just give an example. Let's say that you have a product that costs $5 to make. Formula, packaging, production, freight, all in. That's your landed cost. Your desired retailer wants a 50% margin. So at a cost of $5, you might be thinking, okay, I'm going to go with a $10 retail. But you remember what I told you, and you're saying, oh, wait, I need to think about trade spend. Oh, I need to think about promotions and markdowns and profitability. And so you add in a little bit of padding to your retail. So instead of telling the retailer, I'm going to retail this at $10, you adjust your retail to $14, providing the retailer with a cost of $7 to account for this additional spend. Now that's just some rough math. And I'm not saying that the math is necessarily going to math out. You can work with a CPG, CFO, or a financial accountant to help you work the numbers out. Again, this is just an example for illustrative purposes. One final thing that I'll say for you to consider as we talk about pricing and profitability is, what type of cycle is your business on? Do you have a business where innovation happens frequently? If so, that means you're going to be marking things down frequently. Build this into your margin. Build this into your margin, please. I remember when I worked at Anthropologie and there was an item that we brought in and produced with the intention of bringing in directly to markdown. Now you might be thinking that makes no sense, but we retailed it or showed the original reg retail at $40. And then we said, okay, we're going to discount it to $20 on sale because we knew for that type of item, people love to get a deal. And we thought, that'll work. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do something like that because I do think that specialty retailers like an Anthro have a little bit more leeway when it comes to pricing and less competition directly once you're already in their store. It's very different for you beauty brand founders, so I wouldn't necessarily suggest that. But what I am suggesting is if you know that you're bringing a new product to the market, you know that you're going to have innovation every 1 year or every 2 years, build a model that's going to allot for you to cover markdowns. What do I mean by markdowns? In order for you to bring new products in, you typically have to get rid of some old products. And for most retailers, they're going to require or request that you maintain space unless you're growing something ridiculous like double or triple digits. In that case, they're going to want all the innovation and they're going to give you more space. But more often than not, your space is going to remain neutral. So that means that as you build out your product innovation pipeline, you need to work within the space that you're given. And so that's why I suggest that you just consider things like product innovation and markdowns and build it into your product margin. Now I can talk high level strategy about this, but I cannot necessarily give you a specific model. So I'll give a link to some other folks that I think are helpful as resources to help you along this COGs and margin journey. So once again, keeping this margin in mind is important for your brand, right? It impacts cash flow. It impacts funding for new product development. It impacts your ability to sustain retailer deductions and ultimately building a financially healthy brand that's going to be there in the long run. So I hope that you consider these things as you figure out how you can set the right price for your brand. That's a wrap on today's conversation. The key takeaway for today, healthy margins aren't greedy. They're a necessity. They're going to allow you to grow smarter, grow sustainably, and ultimately be here in the long run. If you found this episode helpful, I just want to say go ahead and leave me a comment on Spotify or Apple Podcasts so that more people can hear about the show. Also, let's chat in the comments if there was something helpful that you found, or send me a DM on Instagram at Scaling Emerging Beauty. I'd love to chat with you to understand your thoughts on pricing as you heard the things that I shared today. As always, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you being here. Make sure you subscribe to Scaling Emerging Beauty so that you don't miss the last part in this 4-part pricing series. I'm going to have another guest episode after this, and then I'll drop the final series in episode 808. Don't miss it. It's going to be great. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.